Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Working It Out podcast. I've got a very amazing guest with me today from a really cool organization called This Woman Runs, previously This Mum Runs. I would like to welcome to the Working It Out podcast, Mel Bound. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I think what we're going to do first is what I do with all of our guests is talk about our Working It Out locker. And what we ask all of our people to do is put one item from your experiences with physical activity and put that into our locker. So we've had loads of previous examples, and the previous ones would include Andy Taylor's being his crutches, and we've had Haley's being our HRT patch. So really varied mix. So really interested to hear what your one item would be.
So I love this question, and I had lots of fun thinking about what I might put in. And I had a massive long list, and then narrowed it down to the item that I've chosen. And it might be a bit of a surprise to you, the item I've chosen as well. So it's a 32-year-old sports trophy, and
Amazing.
it's got a series of crests on it with girls' names engraved, and it's actually a trophy I donated to my school when I was 18, when I left the school. And I think of all the items I could have chosen, it's probably the item that will tell you most about the real Mel and the reason why I do the work that I do now. And so just kind of a bit of context to the trophy. So I'd been a really sporty kid through school, and I played in all the teams. I had the school colours. I played for clubs outside of school and all of that. But I remember thinking and feeling that it was profoundly unfair that my friends who liked sport but maybe didn't make the cut for teams were essentially ignored. I just thought that was just wrong, which is quite a big thing for a 17, 18-year-old to be feeling. But I felt it really strongly. And it's weird the things you remember. When I was thinking about this trophy, I remember I was thinking about a girl in my year who I've actually, since leaving school, never seen. So we went our separate ways and we've never seen each other again, but a girl called Caroline Richardson. And she loved playing hockey and she loved playing netball, but she just never made it into the team. And so she just stopped playing. And even at the time, I just thought, that's just wrong. So when I left, I decided I wanted to leave something behind that would, in a teeny tiny way, celebrate the kids and the young people that tried really, really hard, that really improved, but perhaps would never be the kids winning school colours. And yeah, so I left.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I found out recently, very bizarrely, one of the girls that I played hockey and netball with at school ended up as the PE teacher back at the same school. And we were back in contact recently, and I found out that the trophy was presented every year for 26 years. And it's only recently been retired. And the only reason it was retired was because my old PE teacher, so the PE teacher that I had at the time, she retired. And so they replaced my trophy with a trophy from her. And one of the little things on my list of things to do is I really want to get my hands on the trophy, and I want to be able to contact the 26 recipients of the trophy. Like, I'd love to know what their stories are and what they've gone on to do in terms of being physically active.
Oh, that's a podcast, isn't it? That's a podcast series if ever I heard one. 26 episodes. That sounds unbelievable. Yeah, firstly, thank you for sharing that. A 32-year-old trophy, that's amazing. So it sounds like school was quite influential in terms of your relationship with physical activity then.
Yes.
Digging into your history, as I do with everyone, I saw that you said that you were quite wheezy and asthmatic as a kid.
Yeah.
And that your parents threw you into sports. Was that a big catalyst for you engaging in physical activity, or were you always sporty? And then how did it, like, becoming asthmatic, impact you?
So that's such a great question. And so I was really chronically asthmatic as a kid, and it was at a time before all of the fancy inhalers and drugs and things that we have these days. So it really, if you had an asthma attack, it was a major deal, and you ended up in hospital. And at the time, I also had a lot of allergies as well, actually. So I'm allergic to nuts. And so I'd have these weird allergic reactions to things. And kids notice difference, don't they? And so I became a kid that was a little bit picked on, that was a little bit othered, because I was the weird wheezy kid and the weird allergy kid. And actually, it wasn't initially my parents. It was our local GP. It was our family GP. And we'd gone for an asthma checkup. And Dr. McNee, I don't think he's even alive anymore, or would know how much of an influence he had in my life. But he basically said to my parents, look, we will give her medication and here's what's available. But actually, the best thing you can do for her is get her outdoors and running and active. Because if you can make her lungs stronger, then her asthma will improve. I mean, how forward thinking is that for a GP in the 1970s to give that sort of advice? And honestly, that advice completely changed my life, because my parents did throw, my mum in particular threw me into, right, you're going to go to every club, and we're going to encourage you to do as much as possible. And I think the other kind of real catalyst was, I heard this on one of your other podcasts, actually, from one of your other guests, talking about the influence of a PE teacher at primary school. And alongside this amazing GP, I also had an amazing PE teacher at my primary school called Mr. Lee. And he really threw himself into, right, we're going to really encourage this kid to be as active as possible. And as it turned out, I was actually quite a good runner, and it kind of inadvertently discovered this talent. And quite quickly, I went from being the weird wheezy kid to Mel's the one that we, like in the school relay races, we need to have on the final leg, and we need her to do the 100-meter sprint. And suddenly I had this identity, and it was all linked to being active and running and being good at something. And so for me, that kind of was the start of a love affair, I guess, of me and running, and how wrapped up it is in my entire identity.
That's amazing. And in a bit, we're going to talk around your earliest memories of being physically active, and I'm guessing they're going to be quite interlinked.
Yeah.
Before we jump into that, what the next part we do is we've got our one item. So thank you so much for the trophy. And there's loads of bits there which I'm so confident is going to be linked to what we're going to be talking about later. But now we're going to go on to one emotion. So when we talk about physical activity and someone says, would you like to do some sport? Would you like to go out for a run? What's that one emotion that first comes to mind that makes you think? Well, how do you feel when those questions are asked?
So a few words always bubble up for me, actually, and I could narrow them down to two. So one is headspace and freedom, and I think that comes from a place of, I'm a mum, I run a business, I'm busy. There's pretty much no moment in any day where someone's not asking something of me, or talking to me, or wanting something from me. And so when I step out the door to go for a run, it's an opportunity just to press pause in my brain and have some headspace and some quiet. But that actually wasn't the word I chose in answer to the question. So the word I chose was actually connection. And I chose the word from the perspective of having the total absence of connection with myself and my physicality about 10 years ago, after I had an accident out running and ended up needing spinal surgery and a year of rehab, and really not believing that I would ever be active again. And so for me now, the sheer joy of that feeling of an absolute abundance of connection with myself, with nature, and with the communities that I'm part of, whether that's my running community or the netball team that I play for, or when I volunteer for This Woman Runs, it's an absolute game-changing feeling for me. And that's why I can describe it as a feeling of being tethered and connected. And that gives me confidence. And it's the thing that keeps me coming back to going out for a run or turning out for a match. It's the golden thread that even when days go past and I've been busy, or I've been injured, or I've been a little bit unwell, or I've had stuff going on with my kids, it's the golden thread that gives me absolute confidence that not many more days will go past before I'm active again, because that feeling of connection is so important to me, and to so many women in the This Woman Runs community, which I'm sure we'll get to as well.
I think it's good that you went to the connection and having the absence of connection. And I'd like to pick up on point around, you said you had the accident and you were out of physical activity.
Yeah.
How was it for you when you had this accident, when you weren't able to be physically active, and when you weren't able to engage with people? How did that feel?
Honestly, it was absolutely catastrophic for me. So the accident happened at a time that was already quite tricky in my life. So I was a new mum. I had, at the time of my accident, I've got two kids, 14 and 10, and I had the accident in between. I had the accident out running, actually. So at the time, I didn't realise what had happened. I was out with my daughter in a running buggy, and we were running in the woods, and I had a bit of a stumble. And at the time, I wouldn't have called it an accident. It didn't feel like very much, but actually what I'd done is rupture a disc in my back. and that ended up like it took about a year to get to the place where I had surgery. It was a whole kind of an interesting journey of going through pain pathways and navigating the health system and trying to get the support that I needed. But it ended up in surgery, and after the surgery, because it's such major surgery, I had a disc that my discs fused, and
Yeah.
essentially the brief to me was, okay, for 6 months you can't lift anything heavier than a kettle. Bearing in mind at the time I had an 18-month-old daughter, and you can't walk further than the end of your road. And to someone whose entire identity, as I've just described, is wrapped up in being outdoors, being active, exploring nature, being connected with other people through teams and running buddies and things like that, it was a life changer. And I think I became very depressed, and I could not see a way out of it. The real kind of what saved me, I think, was that I had an absolutely so much of I think what happens in physical activity comes down to a person having an impact and saying something or doing something that actually enables you to take a slightly different path. But I had a trainer that I was working with on my rehab, and after about a year, she'd kind of given me little nudges around, you're okay to start thinking about running again, and I'd always shut it down. And eventually I thought, actually, maybe I can think about it again. And she said, well, why don't you try and find a local woman who has maybe got the same worries and anxieties, that's really time poor like you, that, maybe has got young children, and find someone to run with, because that will help you get started. And that was the catalyst really to everything that's come next, and everything I now do with This Woman Runs, because I went home and I just on a total whim put a post onto, it was like a mums buying and selling group on Facebook, and I put a post, and I didn't give the whole story, and I didn't say I'm really depressed and I can't get out of the house, but I did give a bit of context around how I was feeling about not being active and how hard I was finding it, and just inviting anyone that felt like they might want to be a running buddy to turn up and meet me on Wednesday night at the local park. And it was November, and it was dark, and it was rainy, and I almost didn't go because I thought no one would turn up. But from that post, 75 women turned up to meet me, to come to be a running buddy, to turn up. Can you imagine, as someone that's massively lacking in confidence, that has not been active for over 3 years, that really, like, I really didn't know quite where I was going to start again, and suddenly all these women turn up and are looking at you expectantly, like I had a plan, which I didn't. I definitely didn't have a plan. But what I
was hoping for one mate.
I thought no one would turn up. I did not expect all these women who I'd never met before to turn up. And that night we went for a 10-minute run down the road in the rain along a main road. It was not glamorous. And when we got back to the park, we stood outside the park for a couple of hours and chatted. And it was like a massive light bulb moment that went off for me, where I thought, not only are there all these women feeling the same way, but actually the reason they've turned up ostensibly for a run, but actually what has kept us standing here for a couple of hours is connection, and the kind of shared experiences and shared challenges and oh my god moments, yeah, I feel like that moments, all of those things that suddenly just bonded us instantly. And I went from thinking I can never do this again to feeling hope, and I want this again, and this group of women are going to help me with that. And that's where it all started.
That's incredible. I've read parts of the story, but just hearing it, you can see why organisations like yourselves, why they work so well. It's just because it's just was so natural.
Yeah.
There is a demand for it. The beginnings are very humble. There's no commercial gain from it. I'm just a woman who wants to go out for a run, and I need some friends to run with. Who's with me? It's an incredible story, and that's why when you think of like interventions and the way that, in my opinion, always whether the word is critical or just observant, the way that Sport England used to run, in terms of we create these high level of interventions and place them in random areas and expect the whole country to engage and receive it in the same way. It just wasn't as natural as the new kind of way of working with organisations like yours, where it's you're the expert in that area. You've got that lived experience. You're doing something incredible. How can we support you to drive something better?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so good to hear.
So I was just going to add, Alex, I think one of the things I often think about why we've been able to grow in the way we have, and why we've been able to continue to hold space for women in the way we do so consistently, although we're now in 80 locations around the country. And I think it comes from a personal place of, firstly, having experienced the absolute sheer joy of physically moving and knowing the freedom it brings, that kind of the feeling of strength and joy and all the great things that I know comes from being physically active. But conversely, having gone through that journey myself for 3 or 4 years, deeply understanding at a very kind of deep
Mm.
level how challenging it feels when you are not active to take that first step and then kind of build the momentum and overcome that inertia and overcome all of your fears and the emotional barriers and the practical barriers and everything. I understand deeply how hard that is, and I think having those two perspectives is baked into our DNA. It's core to everything we do. It's how we think
Mm.
about training volunteers and creating experiences and coaching. For everything comes from that place of, I get it, I get how hard this is, but also I know how joyful it is, and I want to give that to you. And that's
Mm.
baked into everything that we try to do, basically.
That's incredible. I think even when we talk about emotions, there's some really interesting words around, and this I love how it's gone from your feeling of connection, and we spoke about when you're not doing physical activity, that you've used words like depression, and then you go all the way through the emotions right to when you're doing activity and to hope. So it just shows that well, sport can bring out some huge emotions, but also can cure some quite dark
Yeah,
emotions.
absolutely.
That's really interesting. And so when we think about yourself, and we've spoken about school quite a bit,
Mm.
it would be really interested to hear around your earliest memories of being physically active. Is there anything? Is it school, or is there anything else that stands out?
My very earliest memories are absolutely school, say primary school. Weirdly, brownies as well. We had a really active brownie pack, so we did sports days and loads of active stuff. But my absolute earliest memory, and probably one of the happiest memories of my life, I would
Yeah.
go as far to say, was a fun run in my village. So it'd been organised
Yeah.
by a local village association for the kids that lived in the village, and it happened every year. And it was from the centre of the village, and we ran, and basically it was running to the bottom shops and back. That's basically what
Yeah.
we did. It was about a mile and a half. And I have got such vivid memories of turning up. We were given a little race number, and my number was number 47.
Good memory.
And I remember, really vividly remember, kind of lining up with all the other kids, and that feeling of excitement, but also butterflies and could I do it, and all of that. And most of all, what I remember is just running my little heart out as we set off. I remember feeling really free and really happy. Like, genuinely, that's what I felt. I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and bearing in mind I was really asthmatic and my lungs were not happy a lot of the time. My lungs felt really strong and they filled with air, and I could feel my heart pumping, and it felt really good. And that just was such a special feeling that I've never forgotten. And yeah, even though I was beaten to first place by Matthew Lambert, who I've never forgiven, I was pretty much hooked on that feeling. So it wasn't even about running. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about the distance. It wasn't about how fast. It was that feeling I was hooked on, and still am.
That's such a vivid memory, and even when you're talking there, you just unlocked memories for me of similar situations which I've completely forgotten about running in school. I think it's really interesting to cover something like brownies as well, because that
Yeah,
hasn't come up before.
yeah,
And they're really structured organisations. In my new role, supporting the Scout Can, we've had conversations with girl guides, and we can see the influential roles they can have. So, how did an organisation like Brownies that help you? What were the memories related to them?
Well, for a start, they had regular sports days. We had sports days against other brownie packs. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, and they were quite competitive, don't get me wrong, but also they were inclusive. So everyone got to go at something. Some, there was quoits races and hula hooping, and as well as the kind of more traditional running races. And I've got a photo actually, and it's pretty blurry because cameras back then were not very good. But I've got a photo kneeling in my garden, my back garden, the house I grew up, and I've got my brownie sports kit. So I don't even know if that's a thing these days. But we had our brownie uniforms, which were the dresses, but our brownie sports kit, which were a yellow t-shirt and brown shorts, and the t-shirt is covered in little
Mm.
coloured dots, and the coloured dots are all of the represented all of the events I'd taken part in. It was one of my favourite
Amazing.
bits about brownies. I absolutely loved it. And actually, recently I went to, actually, wasn't that recently, maybe 5 years ago when my daughter was at brownies. I went to her brownie pack and did a whole talk about movement and running and the joy of that. And actually, the brown owl subsequently joined our community, but as a beginner, and went through our beginner running program, and then was able to kind of take that experience back and talk to the brownies about it. So I think there's some sort of opportunity in there, definitely, because
Nice.
I think by the time girls get to guide, that's where you've started to, they're into that primary secondary transition age, and that's where you really start to see we know that you start to see
Mm.
that drop off in terms of physical activity. But if you can work with girls while they're still at primary school, whether that's through school or through things like brownies, there's a real opportunity to flip their experience of being physically active and make it full of joy and confidence.
That circle of going to your daughter's brownies and then the brown owl coming to your
I know.
run is quite a nice one there.
Yeah.
There's a real cyclical thing going on there, which makes me really happy inside. I think when I talked to my wife, she was so surprised I didn't do something like Scouts. She's like, it doesn't make any sense how keen I am,
Yeah.
and that I didn't do those types of structured activities
Yeah.
because they seem amazing, but it just wasn't something which I had access to at the time. But I can see how the structure of the activities like organized sport in PE and organized even the social activities that you're doing, whether they're inter well as part of your curriculum or external, they all seem very structured, organized, and they've been able to support you to have that nice healthy habit. So it seems like there's been some real influential organizations or schools that have really been able to keep that habit, and then you can start to see how when it comes to a situation where you as an adult and things happen along the way,
Yeah.
slips, trips, childbirth, whatever it is, where you don't have those organizations you have to, who do you turn to?
I didn't feel like there was anywhere to go because the things,
Mm.
injury and rehab aside, even as a new mum, a lot of the things that I might have done previously, like go to running clubs or, I've previously done things like military fitness type boot campy things. They were, firstly,
Mm.
they're just at completely the wrong time. So I couldn't access them. And I think this is my experience. I know it's not everyone's experience, but coming back into physical activity after having kids, there has been an impact on your body, and that ought to be more
Mm.
recognised and talked about. And I didn't necessarily want to go and straight back into the sorts of things I've been doing before, but there was no alternative that was kind of more tailored to where I was at emotionally, psychologically, physically, practically in terms of the time I had available.
I don't mean to say it any other way apart from what it is, but yeah, thank you to people like yourself who've gone, no, I'm going to be brave and put a call out and see what happens, because now it's just an absolutely amazing organization. And so for those listening, if they haven't, if they're not aware, actually, no, I'll pause there and I won't say anything. The next part is around asking yourself to introduce a bit more about an overview of your organization, your role, and its links to physical activity.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll shut up and allow you to do that.
So I wear quite a few hats in sport actually, but I guess my main day job and has been for the past 10 years is working as the founding CEO of what was this Mum Runs that is now this Woman Runs. And my time over the last decade has been spent building what is now a global grassroots community that started from that one run that I've described, from one street corner in Bristol, to a digital community now of 250,000 women and a UK-wide network. We're actually in 50 cities, but 80 locations around the country, delivering thousands
Mhm.
of free 30-minute runs for women every single week through an amazing army of volunteers. And also building, this is new, that we've built a new community-powered app that our kind of somewhat lofty ambition is that it revolutionises running for women, particularly women who are either completely new to running or have lapsed from regular activity for one reason or another. And honestly, Alex, it's hopefully in terms of what I've shared so far and what I put in the locker and some of my early experiences, I feel I have to pinch myself sometimes. I get to do this work. It is absolutely my dream role. And I just feel incredibly lucky to be able to lead, an amazing and ambitious board and team, and be part of a network of obviously the most incredible women who make up our volunteer team. And all of us that are involved in this Women Runs have this incredible sense of purpose and vision around empowering women, all women, actually. This is why we've changed our name. So it's not just about women who have children, just to enjoy being more active, and to do that more often, and to make that part of their life forever. So yeah, that's kind of mostly what I do with my time. I'm also non-executive board member at Sport England. I joined Sport England at the start of last year, and then recently have become a non-executive director of the English Sports Development Trust, which is the team that manages the oversight for the This Girl Can campaign. So I'm really excited about those roles as well, and just being able to bring a voice of grassroots and community and women to the top tables, and being able to bring that kind of lived experience and perspective to some of the conversations in the wider sector as well is something I feel very proud of. So yeah, so that's what I do.
So you've got a few roles there. So obviously you're on the Sport England board, and you're looking after overseeing This Girl Can. So
Yeah.
As people would have seen through my LinkedIn post, and if you haven't seen it already, please head over to the LinkedIn, and we've got the Working It Out group where I post the map on there. So I'm trying to map out the causes of inactivity, speaking to our sector leaders. And the first question I ask is, if you were going to map out these causes, where does your thought process start?
Yeah.
Where would you go to?
Yeah. I love this question because I'm so like you, Alex, and I'm really interested in what makes people tick, and how you, and then the second part of that, which is the so what of the, okay, that's how they feel, but so what, and how are we going to change things? And obviously in my day job, I spend all day, every day, right at the coalface of grassroots sport, and working with and thinking about how we can empower women who and mostly are completely inactive when they join us, to change how they feel about being active, firstly, and then give them a range of opportunities and ways to be active, but more importantly, to stick at it. So that's really what I think about all day, every day. And so I'm interested in what makes people tick. And I'm also even more interested in what gets in the way of making those positive changes in their lives, and the kind of experiencing some of the joy that I've obviously described in terms of what I get from being active. So my thought process, this is a little bit rogue, but where my
I love it.
Where my thought process, when I really think about this, starts is, I guess, the fundamental understanding that everything in science and in public health tells us that human beings and our bodies are designed to move. We are designed to move as living beings, to be routinely physically active. So that's the first point. The second point is that's just not happening for many of us. So inactivity, as we know, it's almost like its own global pandemic, isn't it? So, just thinking about women, 1 in 3 women globally moving so little. So forget about playing a sport. 1 in 3 women globally are moving so little that their long-term health is at risk, and it's potentially shortening their lives because of inactivity. So then if we all take a bit of a moment just to reflect on how we spend our time, and whether we could challenge ourselves to think about how often we've actually used our bodies to move just as a part of everyday life. And I don't mean formal exercise like going to the gym or an organised game of tennis or football or whatever. I'm talking about those really informal everyday movements, like a brisk walk to go and meet a friend, or getting on your bike to go and pick up something from the shops. And when I ask that question of people, very, very frequently they'll struggle to think of any examples. And they're really not alone. And the reality is for us, for many of us, that kind of informal, regular, everyday movement, that's more or less disappeared from our lives. So then there's the so what and the why bit of that question, I guess. And I'm going to go even further back and a little bit more rogue now. But if you think about the days when we were cavemen and women, and we were hunting and gathering for our, to survive, to find our food, to find water, and that's been replaced in our modern life with online grocery orders. We don't even need to go to the supermarket. We literally go to the front door. And physical work has mostly been replaced by days sitting at our desks, hunched over screens, doing Zoom calls, Teams calls. And that's even more so, I'd say, post-COVID. So, so many of us are not even commuting into the office now. We're literally just sat at our kind of desk all day, every day. Our homes are filled with activity-saving devices. We've got remote controls to turn over the TV. We've got Ring doorbells so we can see who's at the door before we even go to the door. My husband even recently, he replaced our light switches with an Alexa command. So we don't even have to get off the sofa to turn the lights on and off. And that was a line for me. Yeah, you got those as well.
I've got.
I mean, I sort of get it, because when you go to bed, you want to turn all the lights off in one go. But I almost had to draw the line at that, because it felt like, God, when are we just literally going to sit on the sofa and not move? And while all of that has been happening, we've tried to fill the void of regular movement and that kind of routine movement with organised sport, with PE at school, with team games, with going to the gym. And the fitness industry, on the surface of it, seems to have boomed. There's so many gym chains and apps and things now, aren't there? But despite all of the millions of pounds being spent on all of that stuff, inactivity, it's barely made a dent in activity. And I think one of the reasons for that is that for those that don't enjoy organised sport, that hate PE at school, that don't have a positive experience of it, that don't enjoy going to the gym, that don't identify as being sporty, that fear judgment when they do move, they just opt out completely and end up leading what are mostly sedentary lives. Now, obviously, it is more complicated than that. I know I'm massively oversimplifying it, but I think when I think about this problem, that's my thought process. And it's why the work that we do is so focused on stripping all of that away and just really thinking about moving more, firstly, and enjoying it and doing it in an enjoyable way, not in a way that you're absolutely going to hate and dread doing. And then wrapping around it this idea of connecting with others, because that's, like I described about my own experiences, that's where the golden thread comes from in terms of making you feel like you can stick at it, giving you the confidence, making you feel like you belong and you're part of something. It's the thing that can help you keep going and make that a regular part of your life.
But it's incredible, yeah. And it's very much aligned with the way Hayley spoke about it in hers as well. Around, I always fell into the trap of belittling other activity and sport being the answer. That was a very previous way of thinking, and I'd be like, oh, I'm just going for a run, just doing some yoga or something like that. And she was like, whoa, why is that a just?
Yeah.
Why are they just movement is important? Like, how do we fit movement into people's lives without them feeling like it isn't enough? We need people to have a change in behavior to feel like going out for that quick 10-minute run to the end of to the shops and back is going to dramatically improve their life. So that thought process isn't too outlandish, as you say. I think that the parts that I'm really interested in is around, you said around 1 in 3 women are shortening their lives due to inactivity. I think that's it's really damning stat.
Yeah.
And then we go into having more time for our bodies to move. Time seems to be when every time we ask for like the barriers for participation. So the two that come up, because I personally feel it's reframing that. Yes, some people generally don't have time, but how do we incorporate movement into the things that they're currently doing? So people can quite flippantly say time, but yeah, how do we work with that? So for yourselves, is that something which you look into? So if we're gonna say, right, we're looking at bodies are designed to move. We have to incorporate activity into everyday life. It seems like your main resolution is how do you do that?
Yeah. We do that we do that in a range of ways, but I'm just going to talk personally for a second because I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this recently, because one of the things that struck me recently are the number of conversations I've had with women, mostly with women who work in the sports sector, who know what I do. And one of the first things they'll say to me is, yeah, I really would like to be more active, but I don't have time. And
Mm,
it's curious to me because obviously these are women that are working in the sports sector, that know the benefits, that understand the challenges, but time is still a barrier to them, and time is a real barrier because if you're juggling a lot of things, your work, your kids, your family, you're caring for elderly parents, etc., etc. We've all got really really busy lives, haven't we?
mm,
And the post that I wrote was around reframing the importance of your own well-being. And it's that kind of old oxygen mask analogy, isn't it? Of if you don't look after yourself and your own well-being, then everything else suffers. Your ability to be a good parent, to be productive at work, to be able to look after your parent, to be, make time for your friends and all the other things you want to do. All of those things are impacted and improved if your cup is full of good
mm,
stuff. Of being outdoors, of moving, of the joy that brings, and the opportunity to get rid of the stresses of the day through movement. So the number one thing we do in everything we do across our communities is start with that premise of you matter, your well-being is more important than anything else. So let's start with that, because if you believe that, then anything else is possible. The second thing is, and actually this is something we do when we first start coaching women. We've got a program called Run 30, which is for women that are brand new to running. One of the
mm,
first things we'll do before we even start running or walking is that we'll work with them to take a look at their diary and find 15-minute blocks in their week that they can ring fence for themselves. And that those 15 minutes might be, I'm going to read a book for 15 minutes. I'm going to listen to Alex's podcast. I'm going to go for a walk with my dog, and I'm not going to take my phone. It just something that is not work, that's not caring for someone else, that's only about you and your well-being. And what's really interesting is how hard people find that. There's a kind of certain amount of guilt around saying I need that time for me. And so if we don't deal with that and confront that, we're not honest about that, then everything else is hard. So we'll start in that place. And part of that is often not just you committing to putting it in your diary, it's you talking to your employer and saying, I've put
mm,
that time in my diary on a Wednesday afternoon and I'm going to go out for a walk, full stop. Or saying to your partner, on a Sunday morning, I've put half an hour in the family diary and I'm going to go and listen to a podcast. And I really don't want anyone to interrupt me for that half an hour. For so many women in particular, that feels really challenging. But if we don't resolve that first and change the mindset around time and uh, looking after yourself first, everything else is
mm,
really really hard. So that's where we start, and then after that, it's really about understanding that it's not about going back to what you were saying about the kind of not being enough and doing something that, oh,
mm,
it's not worth doing that if it's only 15 minutes. It's not worth doing that if it's only a walk. It's doing a lot of work around reframing that and focusing. We do that by focusing on the number of minutes moving rather than how far or fast you go. So in the context of running, so all of our programs will focus on, okay, we're going to move for 30 minutes today, or we're going to move for 45 minutes, or we're going to move for 60 minutes. And firstly, that takes the pressure off. And secondly, it makes all of our programs completely inclusive, because no matter where you are on your journey, no matter how fast you're able to go, we know that with confidence we'll be able to get you to a place where you can move for 30 minutes, and it will be equitable, and everyone will be able to do it, even if our volunteers and our coaches have to manage how that operates so that everyone gets what they want from it. Everyone will be able to do what we're asking of them, and that's really really important.
mm. So I'm looking at the map here, and there's a lot. We've dug into quite a bit of detail around how a person, if we take your organisation out of it in a sense, and the concept, a person needs a lot of support for their well-being from societal structures.
Yeah.
What we've got your amazing example of your organisation, but do you feel there's other organisations or other, say for example, Sport England or local governments? Is there something that could be done more in those spaces so that a person is able to focus on their well-being a bit more, or is, obviously this is multifaceted, but
Yeah.
how do is there anyone in particular? You see what I'm doing here in terms of trying to narrow you down to how can we impact the masses?
Yeah.
How do you think we could do that?
I mean, I think that's why the uniting the movement strategy is so profound. It's for me, it's the reason why I wanted to join the board. It's a strategy I'm excited about and believe and feel can really change things in terms of tackling inequalities for people who are inactive for all sorts of reasons. And it won't surprise you to know that kind of uniting and creating a movement as someone who's a community builder is something that's going to appeal to me. I think working at a place level as well and really looking at how you can connect the dots in a place with the organisations that really understand what that local place needs, what the people in that community needs, is really important. But I think there's still a step that needs to be taken, which is that kind of connection with public health and with education and with transport, that kind of whole system approach, because all of those parts of the system play a part in this, in the kind of firstly enabling a person to move more and to enjoy it and to feel that that pressure is taken away to that often comes with more organised activity and organised sport. So I'm excited to be involved in the next stage of implementation at Sport England and the next stage of uniting the movement, because I think there's very much going to be a focus on the how do we really kind of take those connections that are happening across the country, across the sector and at a local level in place and extend those to wider cooperation and collaboration so that we can really start to have an impact in people's lives.
Well, thank you for bringing the strategy. As people probably do know, I do work for Sport England, but I try not to really go, "Oh, this is Sport England. This is the amazing thing we're doing." I try to very much lead the conversation and steer the conversation in the way that the guest is speaking. And I completely agree. There are where we've said there's the COM-B model, and we've spoken a lot today around capability side of it, and how can this woman runs support women to understand and be aware and to develop so that she's confident that she is capable to do 30 minutes. It doesn't matter what that looks or feels like. But then we've also gone into quite a bit of detail from what Hayley spoke around is the socio-ecological model around there's a lot of individual things here and interpersonal things here which can influence a person, and what the like you said, like what the strategy does is so there's not just one approach, one thing. It's how do we work collectively, and the aim for my map is to go, okay, so what does that mean for a sector leader? So I can see definitely your points around an individual's well-being and how the behavior change tactics that would need to be put in place to work on that. So
just to add to that, Alex, I think the other thing that I really am hopeful about for the future is that we're not the only organisation that are working in the way that we are with building communities and engaging with women or with people in the way they want and need. There are so many amazing community organisations that are doing brilliant work, and I think one of the thing, and they're doing it in quite innovative ways often. But what that means at the moment is that the community bit, what I term community is organisations that are operating on and offline, and they're bringing people together in digital spaces and in person. The market has become a little bit fragmented, and the reason for that is because it's relatively new in terms of sports development. We've been at it for 10 years, but there's lots of organisations in the space that are much newer. It's relatively new, and what I've seen happen is that communities have developed to meet very specific needs for specific communities of people, whether that's Black women, Southeast Asian women, men with mental health challenges, et cetera, et cetera. There's this incredible plethora of communities. I think one of the opportunities in this kind of next phase of uniting the movement, but also more widely, is how we can create better connection between the organisations doing that work, so that there's shared learning and we're sharing challenges and we're
Mm.
championing each other and just creating more collaboration and opportunities to have more of an impact by working more closely together. So I think that's something that is a real opportunity going forwards.
I completely agree. And it's a part of the work which I'm most passionate about is how, and it's a real frustration of mine in terms of reason why I've wanted to work for Sport England as well. Is in terms of there's so much good things going on out there,
Yeah,
and my frustration going through my different roles is surely someone's done this before and failed at this in the nicest way
yeah,
possible.
yeah,
Surely someone knows what's worked and hasn't worked, and I feel like I'm starting an idea which someone a lot more experienced than me has done, failed at, and shared the experiences somewhere. Where can I learn? Where can I get this insight and information easily? I think that's the part which people do try, and then they go, "Well, this I don't have the time to look as more detail than an hour scrolling through it as well." So, connecting those dots is something that just is so important to me.
mm,
So I'm glad that it's come up here, and it's a really important point around the digital space and how we people are connecting offline, but when if someone wants to solve a problem and engage more people, it's very rarely they wouldn't use some sort of digital mean to do that. Whether even if
yeah,
it's like inviting someone online to a in-person meeting,
yeah,
it's very rare that the digital aspect won't be used. So
yeah.
yeah, focusing on that in the next phase is just going to be so vital. So we've covered a lot today, and I think it's an amazing place to leave it. Thank you very much for today, Mel. I hope that was
Pleasure.
an interesting conversation for yourself, and yeah, I'll be releasing in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Alex.